And all you have to do is look at comparisons of, say, like, Buddhist teachings of, developing the discipline of watching your emotions pass and not being attached to them. Recognizing attachments to earthly desires negatively impacts an individual's
equilibrium,
supernatural transcendence, is ridiculous. That, if you look at the core of what Jesus was saying, for the primarily through a lot of metaphorical, symbolic language, he's not that much different from a Zen master. Because Jesus would say things like, well, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself. That paradoxical language is inimitable, intrinsic in Zen teachings from Japan. And Zen being influenced by Buddhist teachings, originally from India, China, and then Japan. So why is it? Why would something so core, essential, and life-changing as recognizing the negative power there is in attaching oneself to one's own will, one's own desires, that Jesus taught passionately, with great discipline about, be so similar in cultures that had no idea who Jesus was? How could that possibly have happened? I believe that it's practically irrefutable that common experience across different cultures, where there was no chance of diffusion or assimilation or communication, is because there is a inherent quality in human life that looks beyond itself, looking for meaning in this temporal whisper, faint mist of a life, as being primarily rooted in what is invisible, namely the connection with Creator and creation. And when you look at the ascendancy, the primary place that creation and Creator have in the history of mankind, you can't escape the data that you collect. That cultures at the core of their identity are looking for an affinity and relationship and attachment to the unseen spirit that is behind the purpose of life and the creation of the world. Why is that a common thread? If Buddhism, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, agnosticism, atheism, Sikhism, monism, existentialism, if all these philosophies have, I lost my train of thought. If they all have the common ground of humankind looking for meaning, and for the most part, maybe outside of atheism, agnosticism, existentialism, for the most part, all these belief systems that have a affinity with divinity and what can't be seen or touched, then that has to be respected. And that, to me, that is the common ground by which we can communicate. Because basically, look at it this way. What does your faith, or lack of faith, because I do want to draw in existentialists, agnostics, and atheists, as difficult as that is in my paradigm, I do want to draw them in as much as possible, because when you're looking at the experience of humankind, you can't discount their experience. But how is it that cultures that don't have influence or direct contact with each other, for the most part, in the richness of their history and cultural identity, how is it that they seek fulfillment and meaning through attachment to Creator God? Is that just a coincidence? Doesn't that strike you as just mathematically improbable? There's something unique about human nature that seeks for communion, resonance, alignment with divinity, with the unseen power that is behind creation and life itself. And if that's the case, why is it a Christian cannot rejoice and share in that awareness and resonance with a Buddhist? And to go even further, why is it some Buddhists seem to act more Christian than Christians? And by that I mean, you see committed Buddhists living selfless lives for the good of their communities and for the advancement of their own perspective for generations. Whereas to me, you look on television, what is primarily perceived as Christian in today's modern world, and it seems selfish. This is who we are. This is our church. We don't believe what that church says. We're trying to get more membership. You need to give 10% of your money so that our church grows. We need to give overseas to, our people who are promoting our ideas, in barbaric cultures. I don't see that in the words of Jesus. And I haven't perceived or observed that in my own development as a human being on the planet, and just my own, search for connecting with God. And, it's not that mysterious, really, when you think about it. I know people make fun of Sarah Palin, Michelle Bachmann, because they bastardize and are caricatures of their own positions. I'm not talking about that, God told me to invade Iraq. Like, people say, they make fun of Bush, that he, invaded Iraq because God told him to. That's not what the record says. That's not what he said. In spite of all his frailties and all of his inadequacies, and yes, he wasn't the smartest president we've ever had, he never said, I invaded Iraq because God told me to. He said he prayed about it. So maybe he was wrong. So maybe he prayed to God saying, Creator of all that is, this is a big decision. I don't want to go in, overtake a country, cause unnecessary deaths, if this is not something that you sanction, ordain, or bless. And somehow, based on his own upbringing, his own ideas at the time, he perceived that it was the right thing to do to invade Iraq. So he was wrong. Maybe he wasn't wrong. I don't know. I'm not judging that. But just to make fun of him because he was honest enough to express and reflect his constitutional right to be a free citizen in the nation as the leader of the country and continue to look for can't think of the right word, but look for the place that his own faith has, personal faith has, in his public life. I think it's unfair to do that to someone. No, as a comparison, I don't think it's unfair to criticize people like Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, and Sarah Palin for sort of flaunting their personal views as if our country is just so stupid and uncultured and darkened that they don't, or it doesn't understand their enlightened view. I mean, that's the kind of self-righteous parochialism that is just not reflective of the spirit, life, and documentation attributed to Jesus. So to compare the two is really a real error in erudition. So what am I saying? What is all this about? Why am I all cranky? Because the life of Jesus has really been reduced to this sort of televangelistic presentation of who Jesus is. I often think that, like people have said it, thousands of times, that, Jesus wouldn't be welcome most likely in a lot of the churches in which he is worshipped. They're not worshiping Jesus. What they're worshiping is their idea of who God is. God